when I own my gyms, one of the biggest things I always remember one of my coaches kind of telling me was, if you can get people to eat more protein, you will retain your clients longer. And if you retain your clients longer, they will end up buying more, spending more, and referring more people. It is highly impactful to get somebody to eat more protein, because the likelihood that they get increased results is higher, and then the likelihood that those increased results drive them to want to continue with you and or refer people to you is then higher as well. What are maybe 2 or 3 options that are maybe easy for people to want to consume, that are a good high protein content versus the amount of calories that you're actually getting in? All right, welcome back to Beyond the Pump, where today we're going to break down getting your clients to eat more protein. Andrew, how important is it for clients to eat protein?
Well, I mean, when you look at everything that you see on a human, all the way down to their DNA, effectively, it's really important because it creates the raw materials that, if you think about like a 3D printer, protein is the stuff that you need to 3D print tissues, and basically just everything. So it is very essential. It's very critical for you to have protein consumption in your diet.
Fair. All right.
Yeah.
Good answer. Next question. Brandon, here's this question. Do you think the average person eats enough protein?
I think today people are not eating enough protein in their diet because of factors like it costs a lot when they go out to dining establishments. There's a lack of knowledge on what protein sources are. And so I think that those are both big contributors to why people aren't getting enough protein in their diet on a daily.
There we have it. Eating out causes your bills to go up. Before we jump into kind of getting people to eat more protein, when I own my gyms, one of the biggest things I always remember one of my coaches kind of telling me was, if you can get people to eat more protein, you will retain your clients longer. And if you retain your clients longer, they will end up buying more, spending more, and referring more people. So when I look at it from a nutritional standpoint, from a business standpoint, it is highly impactful to get somebody to eat more protein, because the likelihood that they get increased results is higher, and then the likelihood that those increased results drive them to want to continue with you and or refer people to you is then higher as well. So look at it this way: get people to eat more protein, make more money in your business. Makes a lot of sense. But Andrew, so we've established that people don't eat enough protein. I think maybe baseline for somebody who doesn't know what enough protein might look like from a generalized sense. I realize there's ranges and everything, and we can talk about that in a later episode of how do we really call it prescribe how much protein should be somebody should be having, or recommend, I think is the appropriate word, not prescribe. What's a good rule of thumb maybe for somebody, and how much protein they should consume? And then what's our first go-to on getting people to eat more protein?
When it comes to trying to figure out how much protein people should be consuming, there's a lot of research that goes back and forth. There is generally an acceptable minimum for people that are considered healthy, meaning they don't have chronic kidney conditions, which even that is kind of a back and forth debate right now. For people that are Gen Pop, healthy, no chronic lifestyle diseases, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, anything like that. The floor for that population tends to be 1.6 grams per kilogram. So if you are in freedom units, that translates to 0.72 grams per pound. So basically take how much you weigh and then take 70% of that. And that's probably a good ballpark. They find that actually recently
just for us less math inclined people, for every 100 pounds somebody weighs,
70 grams of protein.
Minimum, they want to have 70 grams of protein.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Cool.
Yep. Because that's going to stimulate the most muscle building effect, or the most anabolic. Ideally, you want to split that between at least 4 different servings. So you're looking at 0.4 grams, or basically, 18 grams if you're 100 pounds, divided by 4 sessions to kind of stimulate that growth response. So they do find that it goes up to, in bodybuilding populations that are doing cuts, sometimes even 3.8 grams per kilogram. has been suggested, which is closer to like, 1.8 grams per pound. So 180 grams per 100 pounds. It's a little excessive, but the idea behind that is that it prevents muscle wasting, which we know happens. You will literally lose muscle tissue and lean body mass if you don't eat enough to keep your current weight steady. So that's some of the reasons why you want to make sure that you're consuming enough. And that's the general amounts. As far as how to go about consuming that, a lot of the clients that I get, generally speaking, are high-performing executives. And these individuals struggle with having a healthy appetite. And because oftentimes they don't necessarily have a big hunger drive, it's really hard to get them to eat something that makes them feel very full. Oddly enough, I find that there's a condition called hypochlorhydria, basically low stomach acid production, and sometimes giving people some kind of digestive enzyme and or some kind of like even apple cider vinegar, as old wives' tale-y as that might sound, does seem to be helpful for getting them to not feel discomfort from eating that protein, which is number one, you want to reduce the deterrence, right? If it's uncomfortable, your success likelihood of long-term compliance or follow through on the client's part doesn't really work out well. So I say that probably split it up for the majority of your clients is going to help them not feel as bloated, as uncomfortable, especially if they have a low protein intake. At the end of the day, figure out where they are right now and then nudge them up a little bit over time would also be another best practice for how to get them to eat more protein initially. Last thing I'll say on that, most people don't want to carry around a food scale. And if they do happen to have a food scale in their back pocket and you're out to dinner, they might have something called orthorexia. Go Google that. It's very important for you if you are a coach in the nutrition space to understand. But you can use your hands, right? And I think this came from the American Diabetic Association of how to do some portioning. But basically, males and females, you are looking at your palm as a portion kind of measurement, right? We're looking at the diameter and the depth, like how thick it is, how long and how wide. All of that is because, size matters when it comes to portioning. And we want to make sure that we're respecting the portion sizes as it comes to not overeating. Although if you were to overeat on one thing, protein should probably be it because of its higher thermogenic effect. Basically, it helps you burn calories while you eat it. So that's pretty neat. But 2 palm-sized portions for most males is going to be considered helpful. And again, if you're eating 4 meals a day, obviously 8 palm-sized meat things throughout the day, unless you're a vegetarian, in which case, then there's something called the DIAAS, the digestible something amino acid score. Basically, it's like how good the protein source is from what it's supposed to do. So there are grades to that. They did recently find that plant-based proteins do score just a little bit lower in terms of the efficacy of having that muscle protein synthesis or basically that muscle building effect. So things to keep in mind related to what sources to pick, how much. Generally speaking, women or females, 1 palm-sized portion, 4 times a day. So between 4 and 8 for most people is probably going to be adequate.
So Brandon, if you get a client, they need to eat some more protein. Obviously, we've established we're not going from half of what they should be eating all the way to what they should be eating over the course of tomorrow. But let's say we want to start putting more foods in. They're struggling to get there. It's been a little bit of time. What are a couple of food options that we might recommend? Maybe supplements or shakes or whatever, generalized sense. And I know based upon our conversations, your go-to isn't going to be avocados and peanut butter, based upon what we've spoken about prior. So what are maybe 2 or 3 options that are maybe easy for people to want to consume that are a good high protein content versus the amount of calories that you're actually getting in?
Yeah. And you can always go the supplement route if you really want to, but it's going to cost you a little bit more for that convenience. And so grocery shopping, some go-to options that I always recommend to people is Greek yogurt. It doesn't have to be plain Greek yogurt. It can be flavored. Just get maybe the lower fat versions, non-fat versions if you're, wanting to optimize your fat loss process. But if you're trying to bulk, hey, get the full fat. You do you. Greek yogurt, going to be a great protein source. I went through a really big beef jerky phase. So it was kind of like my cheat code. I would just kind of like take shots of beef jerky, little packets of that. Great protein source, very lean.
I imagine you dropping beef jerky and water in a blender and
Just
doing a shooter of that. That sounds
little
a shot of beef jerky sounds disgusting.
The little packets, yeah. And so those are great travel snacks. Another great option are protein bars, just being really cautious on what kind of bars you're buying that do claim to be protein bars, because there used to be a standard of like you would rarely ever see anyone sell a protein bar like under like 15 was like I think the lowest. Now you're seeing stuff like, oh, it's a protein bar, but it has like 5 grams of protein. It's like it has a bar that happens to have protein. So I think right off the bat, three quick options. Great for travel, especially if you're on the go. Greek yogurt, you can find that anywhere. Beef jerky, literally can find that anywhere. Gas stations. I think I've bought the most beef jerky at gas stations in my life. And then number three, same as
100%.
I think that's the only place
airports and gas stations. Number one thing that I've bought is beef jerky.
It's actually kind of hard to find them in grocery stores. I've tried. They're there, but there's not as big of a selection. And then number 3 would be protein bars. Again, being cautious of what kind of bars you're going, looking for about 18 to 25 grams per bar. If you have that at your grocery stores or whatever it may be, online is going to be the best place to buy it in bulk. So I think, those are my 3. Those are my 3 go-tos.
Love it. All right, Andrew, one last question before we wrap this up. And this is definitely an important one. So we were at an event maybe 2-ish years ago together. And I remember the presenter, I don't remember who it was, but they were talking about protein consumption. And I walked away kind of getting the feeling that you can overeat on protein. And by overeat, let's say reasonably, like if you eat an extra, I don't know, 10, 20% is kind of what stuck in my mind in calories in protein, that in theory, weight loss would be, or weight gain would be non-existent or very minimal compared to overeating on carbohydrates and fat. And again, this is my best version of a paraphrase and what I remember. And then also I try to pull things out of presentations that I turn around and deliver to you in that's not what you were supposed to take away from that, Steve, just because it's fun. So do you remember that conversation? And then on top of it, do you remember like some of the actual details, not my version that's just meant to kind of irritate you and make you shake your head?
Didn't shake my head.
You
didn't shake my head. No.
Oh, I kind of nailed it a little bit.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, so, it was Dr. Jose Antonio out of Nova Southeastern University. Phenomenal resource. He founded the International Society of Sports Nutrition. Great guy overall. In fact, they have an annual conference. So if you're wondering about sports nutrition, you should go check them out. But the basic premise is that everything you do requires energy, right? How do you take a banana and turn it into something useful in your body? Well, by and large, there's, like a 5 to 10% expenditure. Basically, in order to make $100, you have to, spend $5 to $10. Think about it like an ATM. In order to get your money out, sometimes there's a fee, right? And depending on what food you are trying to turn into something useful, there's a larger fee. So because protein is such a robust macronutrient and it requires a lot more energy to break down, it effectively has what's called a higher thermic effect of feeding, or TEF. And that accounts for your body has to work harder to turn that into something meaningful. And that's what, Dr. Antonio was referencing when he said, if you overeat, basically you're going to still, that additional 20 to 30% of how much energy is required to digest protein. If you consume 20% more calories from protein, it theoretically might be a wash. Now, I will say that there's a general thing to consider. If you want to control your weight, control your calories. If you want to control your body composition, control your macronutrients. And if you want to control how you feel, whether it's your mood state, stuff like that, then control your micronutrients, your vitamins, your minerals. So when we talk about size, we're really talking about, if we equate calories, if you're eating 2,000 calories and, a lot of that's coming from protein, you're probably going to have a higher proclivity towards weight loss than if you were having, the same amount coming from carbohydrates, right? Which are more energy. If you don't use it, you then store it, or excrete it. And most of the time that's where we see people start to gain, bigger fat cells, which is effectively how people start to appear more obese or to gain that weight, is they're just growing their fat cells because they're consuming too much energy.
All right. Well, there we have it. How to get clients to eat more protein. We're not going to start overnight. It's going to be a gradual increase, a couple of food options to help them if they're not getting it. And then we want to make sure that we're focusing on our calories as a whole. And if somebody accidentally eats a little bit too much protein, not the end of the world. If they're going down that road of really focusing on their body comp, macronutrients are going to matter.
So the last thing I want to leave people with is, obviously there's what you should eat from a scientific perspective. And there's also what you should eat from what your body's telling you. So the signs and symptoms of eating too much protein include things like indigestion, bloating, gas, right? General just GI distress or gastrointestinal, or basically your guts are just upset. If that's present for you, chances are you may not be digesting it well, or you just maybe be consuming too much, aka also not digesting it well because you can't break it down. So try considering backing it down a little bit. On the other end, if you have some hair loss, if you have increased frailty, if you have excessive soreness after your workouts, those are really the top 3 things that just general frailty that might be indicative of you not consuming enough protein. So using the numbers, use your own signs and symptoms of how to kind of nudge yourself forward or backwards and throttle that appropriately.
I thought a sign and symptom or being sore was more so from doing 20 reps of a Zercher step up, not from under eating protein. And
no, that's real man shit.
Got it.
That's real man shit.
Well, anyways, everybody, hopefully you got something out of that. Subscribe, rate, review, please share, throw some comments down below, ask some other questions, things that you want to hear about. We're here to help educate you, make you better coaches, make your businesses grow to the extent that you want to grow them, and help unlock your version of freedom in your world. Thank you.
Until next time.